As Mrs. Fiesel had mentioned, the safety conference, and one of the things that reassured me in some ways is that Mount Vernon City Schools has done some preparatory work to keep our buildings safer. We're not up to what anybody would probably desire for safety, but with the people that we have on staff and the training that our teachers have, we are well on our way to becoming one of the safest in Knox County. And hopefully down the road, with the support of the community, we can do even more for our children. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
Thanks again for hosting us here tonight, and it is a great thing. I commend Cheryl for really encouraging us to have these rotational meetings. It's kind of easy to get stuck in one place, but it's good to get out, and I appreciate the opportunity to get to see East. I've been here all my life, and yes, as a board member, I should know more, but I've not toured all aspects of this building, so I look forward to that. Also, on the safety piece, I'm appreciative of y'all attending that. Unfortunately, likewise, I was unable to go to that. But I heard someone who was once in our district who now works elsewhere, but he was sharing with me just recently the comparison of another large district compared to what he participated in here, and was very complimentary of how far we have come compared to other large districts. And that's a real compliment to Mr. Cedar and Mr. Schaefer and the rest of the folks here in our district, that they're so committed to that. Like you said, there's so much more to be done, but you're never done on that whole safety piece. So.
Thank you. Mrs. Gessman.
Just welcome to everyone. It's great to be out to East. It's been a couple months, should I say, since I've been here, so it's exciting to be here. I would encourage, as we continue to, our kids are continuing to be active in community activities. Annie is this weekend, so I'm excited to go out and see lots of our children participate in both the junior production and the kids portion of Annie. So that's exciting when we can see our kids and how well-rounded they are. And it takes all of those pieces to educate our kids. And so it's exciting when they find their niche. And sometimes we tend to think that it should all be maybe athletics, and we kind of push the fine arts aside sometimes. So it's exciting that our community embraces the fine arts as well as they do, and I'm excited to go out and see the production this weekend. So I encourage everyone to get out.
I'd like to add, and I couldn't find the email, I guess it didn't transfer to this system, but I received an email from OSBA today that there's going to be an emergency alert nationwide on September 20th at 2:18 for everyone who has a cell phone, and it's actually a test to see if there was a need for to communicate to everyone if this would work. So that will happen at 2:18, and they're suggesting that schools maybe use this as an opportunity to talk about safety, and so maybe we can send out that link so principals will at least have that information and can pass it along. But I did want to mention that, that's September 20th. So, okay, with that, we'll go ahead and have East building.
Well, I'd like to welcome you,
maybe sorry.
Before you start. That's okay. I'd like to welcome you as well. This has been a kind of a little bit of a brainchild of maybe getting out and about, and I think we're excited to do that. I think we're maybe getting a little warmer under the collar, and we're going to learn some things as we go in our buildings. The first thing I'll do is make sure we have big boys and girls chairs. But we're excited to be here. It gives us a chance to really get to see all of our buildings. And I really think we're going to engage in conversations about our facilities in the upcoming year. And so the chance just to get out and see things. And I was, with a smile, I was reminded, I looked up at the clock and I said, Carly, is that the time? And she goes, well, no, that hasn't worked. And I said, well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? So I'm kind of reminded of that kind of old song there. So, and maybe before we start into East, just as a quick reminder, we did get on this emergency alert thing, we got a real quick notice, a sheriff's alert that came across. And so we had a small meeting and all of our phones went off and we're like, oh my gosh, what is this? And so, you know, and anybody who got it saw exactly what it said. And so we quickly went into a modified lockdown, only to find out about a half hour later that it was sent by the Richland County Sheriff's Department. And they decided to send it to the adjacent counties adjacent to Richland County. Well, once we found out that that person was never seen in Knox County, we were able to quickly come out of modified lockdown. But it just goes to show we have to always be prepared. It was better to be proactive and go into a modified lockdown, and then all of a sudden we can come out when we know things are better. So hopefully we continue to keep safety at the forefront of what we have going on. We do have a number of reports to share with you today, and first and foremost is our friends from East. All right. Would you rather run the clicker?
Yes, please.
Run it?
Hello, my name is Carly Watterson. I'm principal here at East Elementary. Thank you guys for coming out. Want to share with you guys, East this year has taken on the building theme of growth mindset, and it goes right along with our inspiration from the district to be. I'm sure you guys read that on your postcards that were sent home there. And so as East started the school year, we decided that we were going to have an East mindset. And that started with an open house cookout where we invited our parents and community members to come by, enjoy a hot dog and chips and apples and cookies out on the front lawn as they came in and dropped off school supplies and met their teachers and that kind of thing. So here's some of our families that came by. We had 93% of our parents show up for open house that night, and so we were incredibly excited to have everyone in and through. And that just is showing our growth mindset with community. We're wanting to really reach out and engage with them a little bit more this year than what we had last year. One of my favorite pictures, actually, Miss Frackman took out of her classroom window, and it kind of shows just everybody kind of coming together. You see groups talking, people at the tables eating. This is the line to come into the school. We had t-shirts that were getting passed out, people cooking over here. It was just really a great evening to just be a part of, and our families, I think, enjoyed that also. Going with our growth mindset, in the spring last year, I took a few teachers to a lighthouse school in Marion, and we were able to see the Leader in Me in action. And this building specifically has been involved with the Leader in Me process for about 7 years. And so they've had a lot of time to refine and just really have a great presentation for the day. And we decided we wanted to take on a lot of those mindsets that they had within their building through the Leader in Me and through these 7 habits and bring them back to East, because we felt we weren't that far off from what they were showcasing. And so the 7 habits are: be proactive, begin with the end in mind, put first things first, think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, synergize and sharpen the saw. And so everything that they do throughout the year, it just kind of revolves around these 7 habits. My teachers were so excited. They came back, they asked PTO to purchase books for the staff, and my teachers have ran with it since then. I have not had my hand in this at all. They are just super excited about it. And so what they've done is over the summer they talked about it. They decided, yep, this is something we want to be involved in. And this is a piece of research here showing that the Leader in Me matches today's realities. The 3 evolving challenges are academics, culture, and life skills. And in academics, it's more than just memorizing and recalling facts. It's applying them and being able to use them in actual, authentic situations. The culture then is just making sure that your students are not just sitting and getting, they're actually involved in the teaching and learning process of everything, not just habits. And then life skills, having both personal and interpersonal skills, to be creative thinkers and problem solvers, and having foresight and good listening skills and empathy and team building. And so those are all things that we want for all of our kiddos. And so we've kind of moved forward with this and have started then teaching the habits to our kiddos. So it's awesome to see the collaborations between teachers and the habits that they're teaching. So each week they're going to learn a new habit. Each class will learn a different habit. So this is one example. Every class has had one habit already. This is Mrs. Hannah's second grade class, and the habit that they started with was seek first to understand, then to be understood. And so you can see they've got some ears with some headbands around there so that they know that they need to be good listeners first. And you listen with your ears and your eyes and your heart, and then you're able to then convey things. And so this was just a fun way for them to remember that first habit that they did. The next one that I have here is a video in third grade. I have some kiddos that took a math test, which is our benchmarking here in Mount Vernon, and they were able to set some goals. So they were working on begin with the end in mind. So they're looking at what they scored in the fall and then what they want to be by the end of the year. And so this is their data notebook, and they're going to explain it. It's about a minute and a half here.
This is Private Girls class. We're going to show you about what's in our binders. This is our spelling paper, and we go back and we had different assignments that we've done. And just writing out the assignments. And then we go back over here. This is our scores and goals from the math. Okay, so on reading, I got 203, and when we take it again, I want to get 208, and on my math, I got 192, and when we take it again, I want to get 199 in that. So on my math, I got 203, my goal is 209. On reading, I got 210, and I'm going to try to get 2014.
210.
So I got 205 on math, and my goal is 211. In reading, I got 198, and my goal is 204. Thank you for checking that out. Bye.
So 2010, 2014, that's our goals. So as the students' growth have goal setting, our teachers do as well. We take a look at data regularly. Our teachers take a look at data regularly and set goals based on math as well. Another way that they're going to set goals is using units of study by Lucy Calkins for their writing. A lot of our teachers have embraced this in their professional growth plans. They're meeting about it with their teacher-based teams, but it's just another way that we are using a growth mindset and growing in our academic areas, and writing is a big one that we're going to focus on this year. And so with that, that's our East mindset, just a glimpse here at the beginning of the year, and we're going to continue to be adventurous, be inspirational, and be amazing.
Do we have any questions for our folks from East?
Yes, thank you. How did the children come up with their goal numbers in the areas of reading and math?
So it has target areas. So if you score, 210, then you know that you want to grow so many points for the school year. So this is by the end. We'll take it again in December so that they can have a midpoint and kind of see where they're going from there. But then at the beginning of the year, that's where they've generated their goal from, just to see how much that they can grow by the end of the year. So they'll take it and they, you know, I don't know, what is a typical growth for a year, would you say?
It's different for every child, and the program sets like their score. It's also based on like their past times that they've taken the assessment as well. So, I mean, it's different for every child, but I think just about every student like knows like where they need to head. And as they are in upper grades too, we even correlate it to, well, this would be like a proficient score on your air test, this would be an accelerated score, an advanced score, you know, what are you going to do to move yourself up to like the next level?
The reason I ask that is because if I had been in at that time, I probably would have set a really high goal for reading, but a really low goal for math. And I was, you know, it's wonderful that the children didn't do something that was outlandish, like, you know, create a goal that maybe they knew was way beyond what they thought that their capabilities were. So that was really impressive to me.
And so then at the December administration of that test, then they'll see, and if they have achieved that goal already, then they'll reset that goal then, you know, to be a little higher for the end of the year. So.
I always feel like it's a bit symbolic. It's about just setting a goal and wanting to improve, and then knowing there's that benchmark. They probably don't know what a 210 or a 2010 really means, but it's about getting somewhere and setting that goal, which I think is important.
I also like the emphasis on community. That was wonderful that you
Yeah.
had the day, and I mean, that's why we have neighborhood schools, so that we can celebrate community, so thank you for doing that.
I will say that as we had our first administrative get-together after open house, Carly shared that with the rest of the administrative team, and of course, they're all like sponges, right? Ooh, Carly, when you're done, come on over here. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have a few more cookouts next year, and that's the beauty of those kinds of interactions with our teams, is we kind of take a little bit of the best and some of the neat things that are happening, and we kind of incorporate them. So I think you'll see that kind of a feel moving forward. So well done.
Okay, Ms. Housey? Thomas is here, so.
My name is Halcyon Thomas, and I am the senior class president at the high school. I'm here to share a couple of things that are happening over there. So this coming Wednesday, student government will be traveling to Ashland University to participate in a leadership conference for our OCC, which is kind of a quick conference on the schools in our district. And then this coming Friday, we'll also be taking Spirit Bus to Ashland, which is just a couple of school buses that the students can sign up for, and we travel as a group to other schools and show support in the eyes. And it's really nice. It gets everybody who may not be able to drive to the away game. They get to come, so that's really good. Saturday the 29th, their Key Club is hosting a Walk for Water, which is from 9 to 3. And it's $25 a person, or you can just donate, or you can come and see, and it's raising money to build wells in developing countries. And then later that night at approximately 7 o'clock p.m., there is the music, it's not music boosters, but it's all the music, band, orchestra. They're having a showcase, kind of a kick-off to the beginning of the school year. And then the first week of October, on Wednesday, October 3rd, will be the homecoming bonfire, and we will also be having a parade that goes through downtown and then leading to the bonfire itself. And that Friday will be the homecoming game, and Saturday will be. Got it.
That's a lot.
Great, yeah. Thank you very much. Mrs. Nesbitt?
I don't think we have much to say right now. Everything's going good. We just finished our first interim, so I know our interims were due Sunday, so I'm assuming most buildings were due then or will be due soon, so.
Okay, thank you. And do we have the public? We do have public participation. Mr. Jeffrey Williams,
Just stand you.
wherever you're comfortable.
Well, I'm comfortable all over the place. Well, I just came to share some of my experiences over the last month. I know that you guys were aware that there were some concerns about some of the changes that was made to the programming at Wigan Street. I've been a Wigan Street parent for about 12 years now, and now I have stepsons who are entering into Wigan Street, so I'm going to have hopefully another great 6 years there at Wigan Street. My always had a great experience at Wigan Street. One thing I really appreciate is that the administration there really let the teachers kind of lead programming and lead education, and they had great experiences with the teachers, and the administration really acted as like a buffer to let teaching happen in the classroom. We really appreciated that. I know that my sons did too. And so last month, I know there were some parents that raised some concerns about some of the changes. The sentiment from this board was to give Dr. Dill a chance, that he wanted to meet with parents, schedule a time to meet with them. So we did schedule a time. He did meet with us, and we appreciate him spending that time. We did find out that he has restored some time for the specials. Did get restored. I'm hoping as a result of meeting from some parents and hearing concerns. We certainly hope that restoration upholds and stays there. Courtney and I met with him particularly about specials, about music and advocating for the music program, and offered to do some music with the students there at the school as well. And I wanted to share, in the course of the conversation, the responses that we got were that, coming in, I said, do the teachers generally have say-so in sort of, the development of the education programming in the school? And he said, well, in April, usually I meet with teachers, and we all kind of decide what next year is going to look like, but he didn't have that opportunity to do that because he didn't get there until June. And so he didn't get a chance to do that with the teachers. So his plan was to come in and just be hands-off and observe this year and sort of learn. And I think that some of us who've been in Wigan Street a long time feel like that a lot of the changes were pretty significant and didn't really reflect an intent to come in to observe and just learn. So I certainly hope that observation process and that learning process is something that gets embraced over the school year, and that the teachers bring that. And then my question for him has been, with these changes that happened, was really the why. So, the changes that were made to specials and to research is staunchly contraindicated to education research right now. All education research says the opposite of the changes that's happening. So if there is a good reason for it, if there is a research-based reason for these changes, that's fine, but what is it? And that's been my question, and I still haven't gotten that answered. And so I would encourage the board, as elected representatives of parents and certainly of kids in the community, to have that same expectation, that the decisions that are made to the programming in the schools is based on solid research, and there are answers to questions, and certainly as parents, to advocate for parents to be able to ask those questions and get those questions answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we have Mary Catherine Malone.
Thank you. I'm wearing a lot of hats at Wigan Street this year, so I've got my comments written down to keep okay. So first I want to thank the board for your service. I want to thank East for hosting us, and I want to thank my colleagues and friends and co-parents who are here. And I want us to keep in mind that for every elementary school parent who was here, there was another parent or caregiver watching our children, so that we can be here to share our concerns with the board and the community. And I also want to say that there are many, many parents who texted all of us today that they cannot be here because they're on the soccer field, they're on the pool deck, they're at banding rehearsal, they're at piano lessons, that they are ensuring that their children get the artistic and activity enrichment that they need to foster whole child development. And I think we all recognize the term whole child from the Ohio Board of Education strategic plan that came out last month. That we're taking focus away from standardized testing, from input, output, assessments of learning, to really understand and give our learners opportunities to show what they know in many different ways and to learn in many different ways. And I think that's really important to consider. And so tonight I'm asking us to consider recess as an inclusive pedagogy. These are nearly invisible skills woven seamlessly into the school day and classroom instruction that are harmful to no one, helpful to many, and crucial to your most vulnerable learners, the learners who are at the highest risk of not succeeding in a typical school environment, your learners who are at the highest risk for being non-proficient and then being required to go through 2 remediating sessions, for example. Okay? We know that children who are hungry are so distracted by an empty stomach that they have difficulty focusing and learning. And so we make the opportunity to have school breakfast a seamless one for them. Every child goes from drop-off to the cafeteria to their classroom so that they can have breakfast as an unmarked opportunity during the school day. They are not outed for needing breakfast so that they can go to class and learn on a full stomach. Likewise, children who need to move are so distracted by the requirement to sit on task for what are now 3-hour morning and 2.5-hour afternoon stretches of time that they cannot focus on their tasks. The amount of recess time that our developing and learning children are currently getting during the school day is equivalent to the amount of break time mandated by OSHA for working adults. Let that sit in. And more alarmingly, it is less than the amount of time allowed by most prisoners. Dr. Dill said to me, "I am not running a daycare." Well, let me say, nor is he running a prison for our children. We know that children need to move to learn, and I have seen that quoted by some of the board members. We know that adding recess to the school day improves test scores, reduces distractibility in the classroom, and improves student attitudes towards performance on homework. Recess allows children a rehearsal time for learning and social growth. Rehearsal is a crucial, formally recognized phase in concept development where children play with new ideas to see how well that they have understood them, continuously testing and reformulating conceptual hypotheses. This is called spontaneous concept development. It happens to be my area of scholarship. We know that Wigan Street, the school that historically came closest to recommended amounts of recess and PE during the school day, has not coincidentally historically also been among the highest performing schools in the district. How then does one justify 33% cuts to recess time this year, and what outcomes for our children can we see? Children reprimanded for not sitting still, outbursts at lunch and mid-afternoon, afternoon meltdowns, homework refusal, increased distractibility, and decreased productivity in class. Indeed, this past Friday, a special recess was available to students who had finished their classwork before progress reports went home. The students who earned this recess are those who were likely to have been successful anyway. Keep in mind we're talking about recess as an inclusive pedagogy, one that helps your most vulnerable learners, not as a rule. Those who did not finish their school classwork were likely those who needed more gross motor activity, more recess in the first place, to be able to focus and produce that work. Had previous recess allocations still been in place, research tells us that the classwork for all children would most likely have been more efficiently completed and represented deeper learning. Yet here we are, offering recess not as an inclusive pedagogy, but as a self-perpetuating reward to the already privileged child. We owe all of our children better. And by all children, I mean all children at Wigan Street, not just my two, all children at Wigan Street, and frankly, all children district-wide. We are asking that the board make a commitment to 50 minutes of school day recess to support the whole child approach. This is not a question of fun and games. This is a question of mental health, social justice, and civil rights for the most vulnerable learners. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mrs. Jamie Ingledew.
Thanks. That was a good setup for me, because I'm going to talk about a few of those things too. At the last school board meeting afterwards, Dr. Bennett and Mrs. Fiesel came out and talked to me a little bit, and we talked about ADHD and things like that, and I just really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me about that. And I followed up with some emails because it occurred to me, that we don't often share our children's struggles because, it's just it's not necessarily our struggles to share, and it's just not necessarily socially acceptable to do so, unfortunately. But so I shared with you guys over email some of the struggles my kids have had, and I just kind of wanted to share that, you know, as Mary Catherine was talking about, there's a big connection with play and activity and mental health. And there's a mental health crisis that we're facing right now. Dr. Bennett had mentioned to me over email that there's a 36% increase in the suicide rate for teens. Suicide is now the second killer of teenagers in our country. So I've seen this up close. My daughter suffered she was in the Mount Vernon school system. She had a lot of trauma as a child. She was adopted. And she suffered very bad depression and anxiety and ADHD and was hospitalized several times. She nearly flunked out of high school, and this was with all the best support possible that we could give her. So I just kind of wanted to share that on the record that, you know, our kids really are struggling, and there is a connection there with play and stress and anxiety in schools. You know, we rate schools on test scores. I would really like to see schools rated on homework related, you know, school-related anxiety among kids. That might be a good measurement. You guys probably all maybe saw that the American Academy of Pediatricians came out with a new statement saying that they're recommending that doctors prescribe play because they're not getting enough play kids nationwide, and it's really hurting their development. There's documented benefits to mental health, especially with physical activity, and better academic outcomes, and that's among kids and teenagers. You know, Mary Catherine mentioned about prisoners getting more outdoor activity than we're getting our kids, and it's showing. It also helps with better self-regulation, better executive function, all these things that we see missing in kids now. And Mary Catherine also mentioned, thank you for covering that, about the new Ohio Department of Education focus on the whole child. And I have the little, like the 4 learning domains here, and play and enough recess, you know, help with all of those. So since she covered that. You know, and I'm starting to see already, she mentioned signs of stress, acting out, meltdowns. So my son's in 1st grade, and he's the one I worry about being ADHD maybe down the road. Right now he's just super active. Definitely needs to move, definitely learn better when he moves. So I've seen school refusal already with him. Sorry, allergies. You know, more than once. I've already talked to his wonderful, wonderful teacher more than once. I'm seeing meltdowns at home. I'm seeing all that stress-related behavior that she mentioned. And it's all been so far, after talking to the teacher, who's very helpful and talked for a long time with me about it, very caring. It's all been around anxiety around tests, right? So they already had a math assessment that was computer-based, and she split it up because it's like 70 minutes long, but they were still on the computer for 25 minutes, and he specifically mentioned this to me and how he felt. You know, and he was so stressed about that he like would not go to school the next day. So I would really like to see us stop with the pushing down of academics to younger levels. That clearly the Ohio Department of Education has realized this and has changed. There's an article in the Dispatch about how we're not depending on test scores so much. We're thinking of the whole child. Excuse me. You know, I saw a study that studied the stress responses when kindergartners specifically were given developmentally inappropriate tasks, like where they had to sit for a long time or do things, and the stress responses then, they measured greater stress responses. And I realized that those stress responses are considered acting out or misbehavior, when really they're stress responses to inappropriate tasks and inappropriate testing that we're giving them. You know, I've met with Dr. Dillon, talked with him for a long time, and I so appreciate his willingness to listen to my story and his openness in talking to me. And he said, you know, kindergarten for us kindergarten now is like 2nd grade was for us. And I said, what's that doing for us? Where is that getting us? What it's got is a mental health crisis. and suicide being the second rate of, there are many reasons, I'm not saying that's the only reason, I'm just saying, what is that really doing for us? So I really like this, focus on the whole child. And one thing I wanted to say specifically, and I can leave you with this paper, but I was trying to get some, speaking of developmentally inappropriate tests and tasks and standards, was one thing he showed me that is apparently, it looks like it's district-wide elementary technology learning targets. So for kindergarten, one of them is log into your Chromebook, and there's several here, there's 8. But number 4 is compose 2 to 3 sentences on the computer. And I would just like to ask if you guys think that's developmentally appropriate and how a kindergartner is supposed to type 2 to 3 sentences when they are still learning to read and can't read yet. So I'm happy to leave this document with you that he sent me, but I would just really like to see the developmentally appropriateness addressed, as well as the play and recess. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Andrea White?
Hi. Thanks, Jamie, for mentioning the developmental appropriateness and inappropriateness. Sorry this wasn't planned, but as you probably know, I'm a developmental psychologist, and it is completely developmentally inappropriate to expect a kindergartner, even at the end of the year, to type 2 or 3 sentences. It's not developmentally appropriate to expect that. Maybe the kids on one end of the distribution will be able to do it, but most of them, we wouldn't expect them to. I'm going to come back to the American Academy of Pediatrics report that came out right after the board meeting last month. And what they're asking their pediatricians to do is to prescribe play to their patients. And for those of you who have been taking your children to a pediatrician for the past probably 10 years, you know that they did something similar where the pediatricians were asked to prescribe reading and books to their patients. And now, most pediatricians' offices that I've been in, there's a little free library and there's posters about reading to your child, and now they're making that same suggestion about play, which I think is fabulous, right? But I also think it's interesting that they're of course directing it at the parents, as if the parents have a lot of control over that. Because right now, we're all forced into something that's really dictated by the school. As Mary Catherine said, we're only half. All of us we have partners who have our kids somewhere else. And in fact, one of my 2 children skipped his physical activity thing tonight, the pool, so that he could go with his sister and his father to gymnastics. So we're all sort of picking up where school has dropped the ball, making sure that our kids get their 2 hours a day of physical activity in. It's 2 hours a day that's recommended, with one of those hours being in school. We're not getting that. We're only getting 30 minutes a day of physical activity in school, 45, 50 minutes on days that they have gym or PE. But it's not equaling what is suggested for good development. I'm going to go back to the play piece because that's also recommended to be 2 hours a day. Some of that can be physical play, but developmental psychologists say that in order to develop optimally or even normally, humans need 2 hours a day of play. And this is based on play research with animals, and when you deprive social animals of play, they develop anxiety and aggression and depression, they develop memory problems, and they're not very good at reproducing. Because they can't socially interact with the animals that they're supposed to be interacting with. So to deprive a child of play, frankly, in the way that's going on at Wigan Street, would not be ethical for me as a developmental psychologist to do in research. It would be unethical for me to withhold play from participants in a research study. And yet that's what we're doing at school. I don't mean to be dramatic, but that's really, that would not pass the IRB in any place. And I put my money where my mouth is in terms of the importance of play. For those of you who know, I'm a founder of the Science Play Space. I'm on the board. Come to our fundraiser this Saturday night, please. And also, some of my friends know that this summer I hosted free play dates at our house all afternoon. Come and play all afternoon. I'll probably continue that. And also on Thursdays, first Thursday of every month, we're discussing at Wigan Street a book called Saving Play. And I know Mr. Cedar was there, and there were a number of elementary teachers from across the district, and some teachers from Head Start were there as well, in addition to a good handful of parents. So we're really taking this to heart and figuring out how we can open up play opportunities for our children in this community, in addition to school, not just in school. But I have to give one more shout out to the kindergarten at Wigan Street. They just do a fabulous job with play-based curriculum. And to watch those children learn, and you talked about self-regulation. The way to get young children to learn to self-regulate is to give them opportunities for self-regulation. If you could have seen these children standing for 15, 20 minutes, just standing there, waiting for their turn to cut hair on the wigs last year that Mrs. Ullman had purchased for them to practice cutting. It was phenomenal. That's the self-regulation you want. Right? You don't want the self-regulation where the child has to sit still in their chair, because, going back to something I taught the students today, up until age 12 or 13, the brain uses the same part of the body to maintain posture and stability that they use when they're engaged in a cognitive task. So if you make a child sit still and do their math, one of two things at least will be compromised. They'll either be worse on math as long as they sit still, or if they prioritize their performance on the math, their bodies will be all over the place. And they won't be able to maintain posture, because you're using the same part of your brain for maintaining posture as you do for reading and for mathematics. So they need to move, and they can't learn very well while they're sitting still. Two more things. I want to thank Dr. Dill for adding back 5 of the 10 minutes that have been cut from specials. I think that district-wide we should have 50-minute or even longer specials. In 1995, there was a national study of public schools across the U.S., and music came in at 80 minutes a week. And now we're down to 40 minutes a week in 20-some years. And then, in the district, in 2005, there was instrumental music that started in 4th grade. And then it was instrumental music didn't start till 5th grade. And now we don't have instrumental music starting until 6th grade. And along the same timeline, we had general music meeting twice a week in elementary school, with choir starting in elementary school. And that was pulled back, so that now we have only 40 minutes a week, now 45 in Wigan Street, of music a week. Like, we lose all of this and we don't ever get it back. And that's for educating the whole child. We're going in the exact opposite direction. And then finally, I just want to say a little bit about screen time for children. It's recommended that children get less than 2 hours of screen time per day. That recommendation came about nationally, but the developmental psychologists and the pediatricians on that team wanted to make it 30 minutes or less. But they were voted down because they realized that screens were going to be used in schools. And so they would have to make a higher recommendation. Otherwise, it would look kind of silly to recommend 30 minutes a day or less when they were getting so much in school already. So this 2 hours a day that we all know to be true, that children shouldn't have more than 2 hours a day of screen time, is really a compromise to begin with because of the screen exposure they're having in school. The way it works is your kid gets out of school, they go to their after-school activities so they can get their movement in, and then they go home and have dinner, and then they sit down to do their homework on a screen. And that's a problem because you probably know that screen light exposure reduces melatonin production in the brain. You need melatonin to be produced 2 hours before you start to feel sleepy. If you're looking at a screen at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, my son was 9:30 last night, you've now delayed melatonin production until 11 or 11:30 at night for a child who's only 10 years old. And those effects in melatonin production are greater in children and adolescents than they are in adults. You all shouldn't be looking at screens before you go to bed either, even though I know we all do. But for kids, those effects are even greater. That melatonin that's suppressed by the blue light is suppressed for even longer. So schools are asking us to disrupt family life to go exercise in the evenings or late afternoons, then eat dinner, maybe together, and then to do homework, some of which is on a screen. We're kind of forced into this cycle of then having problematic sleep because of the screen exposure. And I think that's a problem. I don't know about it. So I did have some relief from testing and screens and screen homework, but it's really hopeful for lost.
Thank you. Appreciate your thoughtful comments. Do you have any comments?
Sure, I certainly appreciate your willingness to go talk to Dr. Dill. I think we talked about that last week, and I know not everybody got a chance to do that. I appreciate that he's been willing to listen. And, you know, through those kinds of dialogue, and I know the dialogue that he's had with teachers, I think he's shown some flexibility. And Jeff, maybe I shouldn't probably answer for him, but needless to say, I've had some conversations with Dr. Dill since some of these conversations have gone on. And I don't think he ever purposely thought, let's see, I'm going to go look for research or reasons why I'm going to cut something. I think he purely, quite frankly, looked at the educational, the academic pieces, the things that he did at Columbia, and he brought those with him. It wasn't about trying to find research to validate why we want to cut specials or recess.
No, I don't think he found research for that either. Pointedly, I think there is no research for that.
But I think everybody seems to be searching for that reason.
There is no research behind it, but my question is then, what is the reason? And I understand that these were strategies that were employed at Columbia. Wiggin Street's had the highest test scores in the district for a long time. So what is the desired outcomes? What's the purpose?
Sure.
What's the point? We're not in the same place, and I think all schools deserve that. But again, it's just the lack of any answers to those questions. It's just that's.
And can I ask, was there measurable growth in learning outcomes at Columbia as a result of these same reductions? Can someone say
Yeah, I
that?
don't have the answer to that. I guess I'm just saying, I don't think there was lots of researchable kind of thought when he brought a schedule over. He didn't.
I agree with you. I think that's my concern.
Okay.
And was there a baseline, was there already a baseline at Wiggins that we can benchmark all of the things that you've shared with us?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
They're publicly available in this data tonight.
You know, and I would also say, and I think I'm going to enjoy this play-based book study. We have amazing teachers, and I'm telling you, we don't have teachers with kids sitting on their butts for 2 and 3 hours. We just don't. I go to a lot of schools, and I can go to Wiggin Street, and I can go to East, and our teachers aren't making them sit in rows for hours upon time to do work. They're up moving, they're doing things. I mean, you know, the center work that's going on in kindergarten, and then this 45 minutes ahead of time that is play. I mean, I think our teachers are really cognizant of the fact that kids can't sit for long periods of time. And
yeah, they're actively doing everything they can to make sure that the kids have opportunities to move. You're correct, they are doing that.
And I think we all do that. I think all of our buildings do.
But the
Yeah,
screen-based
they-
assessments that they're doing, they're sitting for a very long period of time, and there's no way that those measures are valid indicators of anything. I mean, we might have a baseline, but what do we have a baseline of? If you have a kid that's entering whatever they're entering on a test that's 25, 30 minutes long for a 6-year-old, that data doesn't mean anything.
Particularly on a continuous curriculum where you have someone who ended first grade math in May, and then you need to retest them on second grade math in August to see what they know about second grade math. And my daughter says to me, well, I wasn't supposed to know any of the answers, but we know how she did in May.
Yeah,
And so why do we need to know in August?
Yeah, the developmental inappropriateness of giving a child a beginning of the year test that's actually something they're not supposed to pass until the end of the year, so they're supposed to get things wrong. Our college students struggle with that, with going through an entire test where they don't know what the answers are. I mean, my first grader fell apart because she didn't know the answers on that test. That is not developmentally appropriate, and whatever you get out of it isn't reliable data.
So it's not the teachers, it's not the learning, it's not the teaching, it's the tests.
And the tests
What we're
are
saying.
no longer required by the district. They were added back in this year at Wiggin Street.
At Wiggin Street?
They are no longer required by the district.
They were not given last year at Wiggin Street.
Are you talking about the MAP tests, or are you talking something different? We don't give the MAP test at kindergarten and first grade. We only start that in second grade.
They were given the Go Math assessment at the beginning of the year this year, and that is something
Okay.
that's new.
And Go Math in kindergarten is forthcoming, pre-test, mid-year, and post-test.
And you don't think that's appropriate?
Well, I'd like to know why, if they're no longer required by the district, they are suddenly re-required at Wigan Street. And what I don't understand is why, if we know where a child is at the end of the year, unless you have a new transfer student, why do you need to retest in August unless you are trying to create data out of our children?
Thank you. After the year that I spent when these tests first came out, I was devastated for the children. I didn't understand it. And so over the years, the tests and the teachers have been forced into a certain box. And consequently, the state has requirements of growth that our teachers have to show for the children. And I don't understand why we have to have a test at the beginning of the year, but because the teachers are expected to have growth for the children, it gets to be forced into that box. And as much as sometimes they don't want it, it becomes a picture of, okay, is this teacher doing what they're supposed to do? Is this school doing what they're supposed to do? Is this district doing what it's supposed to do? And then too, unfortunately, it also comes down to money. Sometimes the state wants us to go ahead and do these tests because the testing companies get more money out of the whole process. And
Is my child getting paid to produce the data?
Pardon me?
Is my child getting paid for their data that they're producing?
Is your job
Is my child getting paid for the data they're producing for the testing company?
Well, according to, in a way, yes, because then if the state feels that the school system, for instance in Youngstown, was not producing the number of great children to graduate, then that school system was penalized. So in regards to the money issue, years and years ago, we had, before we had major cutbacks in the school system, we had 4 music teachers, 4 PE teachers, and 4 art teachers at the elementary level. And then when things fell out, the bottom fell out, those cutbacks came. And then in the twisted sense of the testing, that also pushed some of the times off. And even the DARE program was no longer able to be fit into the school year, even though, I thought it was beneficial. It's convoluted and it can be very, very stressful. And as a parent and a grandmother, I understand that pain. And I'm not giving it as an excuse. The state requirements that are pushed down onto our professionals is outlandish. And even though they sometimes may want to say, I'm not going to give this test, that they often can't do it. They have to.
One of the things that I brought up when I first spoke was that one thing I appreciated about Wigan Street is that the roles, decidedly or not, that the administration seemed to take on there, my experience there, was to be a buffer for the exact thing that you're talking about so that teachers could teach. So when you say, I understand that there's a lot of convoluted regulations and funding algorithms and everything, we're fully aware of that, and the difficulties that are placed on teachers. So I think as a parent, what I'd like to see is the administration, everything from the board to the superintendent to the school principals, to act as a buffer to look at creative ways, strategic ways to buffer these things so that teachers can have the latitude to educate kids the way that they know how, because they are the ones who are in the room They do care. And so imposing tests that aren't even required, aren't even part of that convoluted algorithm anymore, to continue to impose them and put that onto the teachers is unnecessary. And I would hope wouldn't be supported. And even beyond that, because that to me is just unacceptable, but then even beyond that, to go for the administration to go the extra step and say, okay, these convoluted, complicated issues are creating difficulty for our teachers to teach. How can we get creative and strategic to help buffer that so that they can do their job and teach our kids?
And in some ways, I think the video that we saw from East shows that they do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the video from Wigan Street next year that shows the same thing.
Oh,
I think that was great.
I imagine that, when Dr. Dill was at Columbia, he did a lot of videos of the children at the school. So it may be down the road, I imagine. I don't know. A lot of times we just have to kind of voice our opinion and voice our concerns. And as I said last month, time sometimes is a good indicator of, well, yeah, this worked, and no, it didn't work.
May I say, Mayor, that some of us are not voicing our opinions. We are speaking as experts in our field of scholarship. And it is belittling to tell female scholars that their work is in vain.
Well, I wasn't implying that.
I'm asking the board to be mindful of that, because that is something else that we have heard in the administrative office at Wigan Street.
Well, I wasn't implying that by any means.
And so I would also like to add that Wigan Street, without the Go Math tests, historically has had an A rating on progress in continued growth for their students, as well as raising at-risk students to levels of proficiency. One of 2 schools in the district with their previous schedule of recess and specials was able to do that. And so again, you don't understand.
So when you say yes, sometimes it's time is the best teller. You're right. Wigan Street has been operating as it's been. I've been a parent there for 12 years. And yeah, over that time, I have seen that what's built over time, the way to do things. And I think the district has seen good numbers. If numbers is what you need for your funding, Wigan Street's been giving them to you for a long time. So if there's changes, again, why? Why fundamentally, structurally change the educational program in a school that is doing just fine? If another school needed some help and there was a strategy and it worked for that population of kids, great, wonderful. Why come into a system that's not broken and change it with no answers, and even when people are asking? That's, for me, I just would like to have questions answered. I appreciate time. I appreciate sitting and listening to my concerns, but I'd like to, we still don't understand, what's trying to be fixed, what's the desired outcomes, what's the strategy, where did it come from? And I think as parents, we deserve that. It's not too much to ask.
You've given us a lot of things to think about, so I appreciate that. And I think we could go on and on, but in the interest of time, we probably need to move forward. So again, thank you for your very intelligent comments and thought-provoking comments. And we have superintendent's report.
I just have one item for information. If you go on to the state's website, you can begin to look at some of this district report card data. I know that as a district, we're meeting as a DLT team tomorrow to really begin to dig into some of that data. There is an interesting article put out by the Ohio Department of Education from Dr. Paolo De Maria. Mm-hmm. I would encourage you to go on the state website and take a look at some of that information. They give a pretty good recap. Interestingly enough, as we continue in this testing environment that's mandated to us, of all of these tests, you'll notice that 80% is the new benchmark and the rigor that they have required of the districts. You'll notice here's the state average for this year. And so while they do point that we have improved as a state, we don't have one indicator that's been met in the state of Ohio. So they've got the bar raised certainly very high. As you dig down into some of this information, he really tries to tell Ohio's story relative to it. And then you can begin to go in and drill down into even our data. And we have some things to be very proud of. We got some things we got to work on. And I know in our DLT meeting tomorrow, we're going to spend some time taking a look at that. We believe we've got some really exciting news to share in the coming week about one of our elementary schools, and we'll have to leave it at that. But I might say it's a designation this school has received at one point in time, which is pretty special, this blue ribbon designation. But we certainly have our areas we need to target and focus in on, especially as we get a little bit more to our upper end, to our middle school and high school. We've got some work to do. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. You can take a look at some of our information there, and then we'll come back to the board and have a little bit more detailed conversation about district level conversations and looking at that data. So I think that's an important thing to recognize. I know I talked to my colleagues around the county and also around the state, and we all are asking the same questions. Allison's asking that questions. Grant's asking that question from the newspaper. I mean, we're looking at those kinds of data pieces and trying to move ourselves forward. We would love to have some of that testing time reduced if certainly that was something that would come down from the state level. Other than that, I have some items for recommendation. Under item B, I have one home community school participation, and that's Anna McCann for the swim team, for your consideration.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion then to approve that item as read.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mrs. Fiesel. Were there any questions? Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel?
Yes.
Mrs. Regola-Dye?
Yes.
Mrs. Gaspar?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. In interest of time, the student liaison report, I'm just going to mention one item, and that is the section on afraid to call parents, say something positive. And this principal found that why not regularly tell parents about the positive ways students interact at school instead of waiting till there's something negative to call them. And he used Google Sheets, excuse me, to keep track of paired communication so that he knew how often he was communicating with each parent and to make sure each parent was contacted throughout the semester. There's an example about one student who was called, and you can see it right there. I make parents tremble in fear when I call home. Hi, this is Mr. Malley. I hope I haven't called at a bad time. I just wanted to talk to you about something your son said today. And the parents probably thinking, this is terrible. To the biggest bully in the grade, he said, leave the kid alone. I still cry sometimes, don't you? It's no big deal. And that was the noblest act of courage I've ever seen. And he took time to call the parent and tell them about that student. There were other examples that are provided as well about Katie, who had a passion for art, and he picked up on that and talked to the parent about that and was able to engage the student who had trouble in her other subjects. The positive impact is not only on the parents, but it's also on the students because they recognize that you really care about them, that they're no longer invisible, and that they appreciate being noticed. So it can change a life, maybe just for a day, but at least for a day. The second article is about the district draft social media policies and 4 key elements to consider. So we might want to review that when we look at our policy. So just make it brief tonight. And we'll move forward then to recommended items for approval for curriculum.
Well, you'll see we have 2 items for board approval tonight. An overnight extended student trip, the National FFA Convention. That'll take place on October 27th. And we have the approval of a gifted service plan, just some minor revisions. Some of the testing protocols we've used in the past are now no longer valid, so we had to revise some of those. So those 2 items for your approval.
Okay, I would entertain a motion for those 2 items for curriculum.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Regola-Dye. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Gatzman. Were there any questions? Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Regola-Dye?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. Fiscal services, share our financial report.
The regular financial report on page 1, you can see our balances at the end of the month of August. We're almost $15 million. Again, we had, the taxes were collected then in early July, so we have a nice balance there. Next page. You can see that we should be at about 17% of the year. We've got 17.17 on our expenditures, higher on our revenues, but if you look at the top on our taxes, of course, we've collected almost half of our property tax and our personal tangible tax, so that inflates that amount, but we're pretty well on track with that. And remember, next month is the 5-year forecast, so we'll have a really detailed description of the budget for this coming year, and that will be submitted to the state then at the end of October. The interest, almost $28,000 already just in 2 months, so that's pretty good. We're on track to do really well this year with interest, and the rest of that report is just reports that are printed onto the system if you want to look at those. The appropriations are due by the end of September to the county auditor. If you look at the yellow column, those were the temporary appropriations that you approved in June so that we could spend money between then and now. The blue line is the additions that will make it total. The green line, which is the total appropriations for all funds for the year. And as you know, those are occasionally changed if the state funding comes in a little different. The federal grants sometimes are adjusted during the year. Some of the 018 or the 019 especially are some local grants. So if a teacher would happen to go get a local grant from any kind of an area agency and bring that in, then I would have to change the appropriations because obviously we would be spending more money there. So when you approve this, we'll be sending this to the county auditor, and they'll send us back a certificate that shows that we don't have more spent than we have on my certificate of resources. So that's the typical way that works. And then we have the following donations to Twin Oak Elementary from Tim and Regina Miller. It's a greenhouse valued at $750. Donation to Wigan Street Library from Heather Waugh, 11 books. To Twin Oak Library from Natalie Cooperrider, 9 books. To East Elementary from Sandra Fennell, 5 books. To Wigan Street Library from Ann Berkey, that's 9 books. And then there's a memorial book. The title is The History of the Big Safari. It's in memory of Colonel William Grimes, U.S. Air Force, retired father of Bonnie Schutte, who's a teacher at the high school, and that will go into the Mount Vernon High School Library.
Okay, thank you. I would entertain a motion then to approve those items as read by our treasurer.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Regola-Dye. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fiesel. Were there any questions? Would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Regola-Dye?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. And legislative liaison?
It's rather brief also. Legislation that's just been introduced, the House Bill 722, prohibits individuals and public and charter schools from using state funds in exchange for not making disparaging or negative comments about the entity or the individual. HB 726 allows a licensed healthcare professional to assess and clear athletes to return to practice and competition. And SB 325 focuses on the background and sexual misconduct check policies for schools and charter entities. And that's really it right now.
Okay.
That's all that's happening.
Thank
Kind
you
of
so
a lame
much.
duck session, I
It
think.
is.
That's
very.
Okay, we have some facility requests.
Well, we have a lot going on in facilities requests, actually items A through almost T, I believe. So The district facilities are being utilized, and that's a great thing. And so I can run briefly down through here, but you're looking at your library folks, a Bible Club, Mount Vernon Girls Basketball, Ohio Farm Bureau. I mean, you're going to see a whole number of things, a Kenyon College Dance Program, baseball teams, the Billy Shakes Project out at Wiggin Street. So as you can see, we have a whole lot of requests for use of our facilities, and we're happy to do that, in this case, free of charge. So those for your approval, and as well as Green Valley Design. This is the design company that is working right now with the Booster Club on a field house project. They're also doing some work on a bus garage, so this is in addition to what they performed in the past. So those two items for your approval.
Okay, thank you. And I would entertain a motion to that effect. Thank you, Mrs. Fiesel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And were there questions? Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Fiesel?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Regal-Dye?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, motion carried. Student services.
I have two contracts for board approval. The first is a service agreement with the ESC of Central Ohio. The reason it's not our ESC is because our ESC doesn't have an orientation and mobility specialist employed. So we have to go out and contract it elsewhere, which we've done for a number of years. So it's just on an as-needed basis. Really very little of that happening in the district. So that's that contract. It's a repeat from contract before. And then the contract with North Central Ohio ESC, another one, is for audiology services. And this typically is for about half a dozen students who have hearing impairments. Some of those students, we use FM systems that actually boot onto the bottom of their hearing aids and allow not just regular classroom amplification, but specific amplification for them. So that's on an as-needed basis. Sometimes we also use that individual when we get a new student moving in with some pretty extensive hearing reports, and we really need an audiologist to help us understand what to do with that student in terms of supports and services. So those are for your approval.
Okay, thank you. I would entertain a motion then to approve the student services items as read.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Getzmann. Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Regal-Dye. Were there any questions? Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Mrs. Regal-Dye?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, motion carried. And we're personnel, certificated licensed staff.
Okay, under items for information, this is just a small revision. We have 8 teachers who are part of this unified arts category, and I think it was reported last meeting that there was 6, so we wanted to make sure we made that correction there as an item for information. We have a number of items recommended for board approval. Resignation, one resignation, the continuing contract of Elizabeth Bonatti. We have a number of substitute teachers, home instructors, and the traditional kinds of things that we tend to experience on a monthly basis, especially as we move and transition, believe it or not, from fall to winter, dare I say it, but we'll be thinking about that soon enough. So we have, advisors, supplemental coaching, homework study tables. So those items through H for your approval.
Okay, thank you. And I would entertain a motion for those items.
So moved?
Thank you, Ms. Regal-Dye. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Getzmann. Were there any questions? Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Regal-Dye?
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. Classified staff.
No items for information at this time. We have 3 items for board approval. The first are transfers of 2 employees to different locations within the district. Some substitute employment. We're always in need of substitutes. And then we have the Supplemental Health Insurance Committee that meets on a regular basis to review our insurance platform. And so we put those folks down there as well. So those 3 items for your approval.
Okay, I would entertain a motion for those 3 items as read.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Regal-Dye. Were there any questions?
On the busing, are we staffed pretty well? We have backups?
Well, right now we have a number of substitutes. We just hope to keep those substitutes. Obviously, when we get to different times of the year, taxes that group, it makes it more of a challenge. So right now, we're okay, but we could always use more.
As now last year, we were really searching to try to find people.
Putting signs up out on Harcourt Road, and, we're probably going to continue to do that.
And other school systems, you see those same signs hiring bus drivers.
Right.
Danville's superintendent drove the first week of school, I heard.
Yeah.
Has a school bus
Oh,
endorsement,
gosh.
so he had to jump on the bus.
You got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
I have a license, but
You didn't want us to
I don't know if they want me driving.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Regola-Dye?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mrs. Getzmann?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes, motion carried. That brings us to the end of our meeting. Did you need executive
I
session?
do, I would like some executive session time, but I thought in the essence of, if it's okay with the board, while these folks are still here, if we could maybe walk around and take a look, and then we'll come back, and then if we can go into executive session. I want to let them be able to get home. I know Carly will want to show us the building, and it's got some Dungeness caverns in here if you're really willing to take a chance. Is that okay, if that's,
Sure.
it's okay with the
So
board?
we'll pause our meeting and tour the building, and then we'll come back for executive session.